Okay, we're going to end Chapter 8 with a discussion of what's called critical chain. It's a little different. You're going to see not a lot, but a lot of your companies might be talking critical chain project management. So let's talk about that. This is based on books by Goldratt, and he had two books called The Goal and Critical Chain, both pretty simple little books. Good reads. He does a nice job of making it a read. And so I would recommend these if you had some time, especially this one on critical chain. There's more complicated books on this whole critical chain project management if you're looking for more reference later on. So let's go into this a little bit. So critical chain project management claims that the critical path to project management's flawed. They don't like quite the critical path, and the focus shouldn't be on the critical path, it should be on the critical chain. Alright, so what is the critical chain? It's defined as the longest duration path through the project, considering both the task dependencies and the resource constraints. Well, we kind of looked at that, so to me it's somewhat similar. You'll just see a few little differences here. And so let's look through this. So critical chain is a method for planning and managing that puts an emphasis on resources. Again, we kind of put some emphasis on resources already. It's compared to traditional project management, TPM, that we've been working up to now. That's called TPM versus this critical path method, which emphasizes rigid scheduling. So let's look at that some more. So it's based, like I said, those two books by Goldratt, Theory of Constraints, basically says every project has a goal, and often one element, or maybe a few, prevents you from achieving that goal. So the element is the constraint, and achieving the goal in our case is focused on finishing the project on schedule and eliminating those constraints along the way. Okay, so again, you're going to see some minor differences here, but I want you to be aware of this theory. So the theory of constraints applied to critical chain project management says the constraint is the project duration or due date. Customer wants a due date. And we're constrained there with resources. So how can we get to that due date and meet it on time? So first of all, they talk about tendencies that cause us to overestimate projects and get us in trouble. And let's talk about these. So Parkinson's law. So that one is basically saying that if I give you a schedule and a time, I'm going to do what it takes to fill that schedule. I gave you an estimate, and I've got all kinds of things I can get to that estimate. I can polish the cannonball, do different things, and I can get to what I told you I was going to do. All right? Self-protection is, what do we estimate? You and I always estimate the worst case because we're protecting ourselves. I don't want to tell you this short thing and come in late. I'd rather tell you this longer time and know that I have some comfort in there. Drop baton. How many times do we drop the interface to the next team that needs the project? That happens over and over again, so projects come in late. People do multitasking. We don't mean to do that up front, but we end up doing multitasking. That always gets us in trouble. There are many bottlenecks that happen along the way, and student syndrome, or really a better name for that, is procrastination. We always wait till the last, I got time, I'll do that, I'll get to it, and we procrastinate and get it done. How many of you wait until Sunday night to get the homework done for this class when you knew you had all week? Probably quite a few of you. do the procrastination. All these things end up giving us, seems like, a longer project than we really need to do. If you look at this here, it's basically saying all of us can kind of have this best time, worst case time here. I give you this worst case estimate, I'm comfortable there, and I'll procrastinate or do other things, and I'll get it done by that worst case estimate. Okay, rather than trying to have a better estimate here and trying to work to this better estimate. Remember, we add up all these worst cases and these distributions. Hopefully we get a Gaussian distribution on the project. That's going to become important in a minute, because what I'm going to force you to do now is I'm going to force you on Critical Chain to give me this this 50% estimate in here, your mean or median estimate. Because I'm going to argue, first of all, I'm not going to penalize you if you do come in over, assuming I think you're doing your best effort, but I know you're giving me a 50-50 chance. But guess what? Half the tasks will come in under, half will come in over. I think I'll still get my 50-50 when I average out thousands of tasks. So what we're going to do is reduce our estimates to your 50-50 estimate. We're going to end up getting some buffers in here though. Okay, I know that if I'm forcing you all to 50 and 50 and add that up, it's kind of dicey, so I'm going to put a little project buffer on the end, but we're all going to know that buffer's there and try to work to it. We're going to also generate some feeder buffers for the non-critical paths. We'll see those. And a resource buffer. This is not really a time buffer like these two are. This is more of a flag because this is the drop in the baton. So we're going to have on critical cases kind of a resource buffer. It's a time when I'm going to flag the next person here to alert them their resources are needed. So we're going to make those kind of buffers in here. So let's see how that works moving forward here. So theory of constraints, I'm going to identify the constraint or the bottleneck, decide how to exploit the constraint, subordinate non-constraints, elevate the ones that are constraints. I want to make visibility to those and work through that. This will be clearer here in a second to you. So let's look at this here. You all gave me tasks A, B, C, and D. Each task, you kind of said task A was going to take this long because you gave me your worst case. B is going to take this long, C and D. So instead, I asked you to give me your best 50-50, and now I'm going to manage to that, and I'm going to take all the slack that you all built in and put it at the end. So we're going to try to get this project done faster, but knowing we have some project buffer out here, contingency if you want to call it that, later on. So traditional project management's kind of this, Critical Chain's trying to get everybody to get to this 50-50, put some buffer at the end, and still get this done even faster. So comparing the two, we're still defining the network, still identifying the critical path. Here we're kind of resource leveling. Remember, we resource leveled. Here we're going to kind of develop the critical chain. But again, you're going to see it's kind of similar. So let's look at an example. Here's task A1, A2, 6 days, 4 days, B1, B2, 4 days, 4 days, C1, 2 and 3, 6, 6, and 4 days. So if I add this up, it's a 16-day project. Again, simple projects just to give you an idea on that. So instead, first thing we're going to do, this was first thing, create this network diagram. But remember these days. Next thing I'm going to do is reduce the task duration, and I want to go to 50-50. Let's just all say, for simplicity here, we're just 50-50 is half the time in all these. That may not always be true, but let's just say you all kind of double the duration. So now I've moved them all to half, and I've converted it to a late schedule. What does that mean? So if you look here, I was scheduling those as early as they could be done, and I had the double time in there. I converted them to half time and as late as they can be done. Okay, so now I've cut this from a 16-day to an 8-day because I cut everything in half. But I don't have any buffers in there yet, so we'll get to the buffers. So now I've got this network schedule. Now I'm going to assign resources. So I got Bert and Ernie here, got Elmo working these tasks. So now we've assigned the resources. Now I have to resolve the resource conflicts, because I got a conflict here with Ernie. He can't do all these, so I've got to back up these tasks here, because remember I went to as late as possible. Let's back these up now. So now Ernie's got to start these two tasks here and get into this task here. Elmo's still okay. We're still at 8 days so far on this, so we're okay. Now we'll start putting in our buffers. Okay, so we've got a little buffer here on this particular path, the B path, but it's really not a buffer because it's feeding Ernie up here. But it's kind of a B path buffer because I don't have to get B done really here. So it showed up as a feeding buffer here, but because of Ernie I got a constraint. At the project we put a buffer. So I had you all cut in half, okay? So we were 16, cut in half is 8, took all your buffer, but I'm not going to eat up all the buffer. I'm going to say, I don't need, you're all kind of giving, let's take half that buffer, okay? So now we're trying to get this done in a 12-day project versus a 16-day original project. I've asked you all for 50-50. I'm assuming kind of some of you are going to be, half of you be better than that, half of you worse, but I've added a little bit of buffer out here. Let's look at another example so you can see how this has gotten me down to 16 to 12. Here's another one. Task P, Q, R, S, T, and Z. The days, column days here on those, laid it out. It's a 32-day project on that. And now I want to try to go do critical chain. I'll jump and show you this in Microsoft Project in a minute. So we want to reduce the task durations and generate buffers. So we had a 32 going to cut all the tasks in half. So 8 went to 4, 12 to 6. Again, I'm just assuming the 50% is halfway in between. Again, may not always be the case, but simple for our explanation. Put in some feeding buffer, project buffer. So we're still at 32 here because I just sucked up all the project buffer, but we really could cut that project buffer some. So we're going to get into here, and now we're going to reduce that project buffer. So now we're going to get our path down. There's lots of different schemes for maybe reducing this buffer. Simple ways, cut it in half, but if you do some research in the books, different ways of kind of maybe doing some fancier methods of thinking through and reducing these buffers. But I'm keeping it simple here. We've cut the buffer in half too. I don't think we need it all because it's not all going to come to worst case. So now I've cut the project down and I've done that. So I have to now add resources, technicians in here on that, added other resources here, and now I want to schedule it with the resource constraints on that. So let's look at it. I'm going to jump now back to Microsoft Project. So here we are. We put it in originally 32 days. Then I put in the technicians and the engineers in here. And I had a 32-day project. However, you can see I've got some resource issues. So even though I thought it was 32, it really wasn't even 32 to begin with because of resource constraints. So let's level this. And actually it went to 44 days after I leveled it. Let's fit this in here. So it actually went to 44 days. With just taking our classical method of doing it and putting in the resource constraints. All right, let's go jump and look at this though. What if I did this critical chain, cut everything in half, okay, because you all gave me the worst case, now I'm cutting it in half. I still have that resource constraint, and let's level this. Level all, 22 days. So, okay, I'm back to cutting it in half because the other one was 44. Now with this, I'm 22. Now I can still go and add my resource buffers at the end here and put in, okay, I've cut you all. I know that there's an issue. I'm not going to penalize any of you for coming in off schedule because I know you all gave me 50-50. And again, I'm assuming you're working hard on it. I know that half of them are going to come in ahead and still half of them over, but I believe it's going to average out. But I'll still add some buffer in here. Because I went from 44 to 22. That's 22 days. At least even take half of it. I'll add some buffer and tell the boss, I think we can get this done in 33. This is critical in a lot of places. Let's say you're trying to beat competition to a project out the door. You want to cut that schedule the best you can. So by doing this, to me, the benefit of the critical chain is really just not penalizing the team and getting everybody to give you their 50-50, then balancing it, then putting in some buffers at the end because you know you're pushing everybody to that 50-50 day and working that out. So you can see, but we could have done this in traditional project management, to me, scheduling, just cutting everybody's buffer. So now, let's say you do that, and you get your buffer out there. Now what you're going to do is watch your buffer. So as long as your buffer's out here, and you generate some region, in our particular case, what do we have? 11 days buffer. Maybe as long as you're greater than 8 days buffer, you're figuring you're okay. You get down between 5 and 8, maybe you're doing some planning. You get down less than 5, you're going to have to act on that because you're seeing your buffer eroding way too fast. So generally with critical chain, you'll develop some buffer regions because and you'll see originally up front your buffer going up and down. As long as it's in some region, you're okay. Then you start getting worried later on. So critical chain, both the sequence of precedence and resource dependent. If resources are always available in unlimited quantities, then critical chain and critical path are basically the same. Unfortunately, they're not always available in unlimited quantities, so people are pushing the critical chain method. If you really want to see more about this, I gave you some reference books. This is also, there's a company that does critical chain software to help companies plan. They had a nice little YouTube video, or I wouldn't call it YouTube, that's not demo video, to explain a little bit more about critical chain. So just I want you to just be aware of the high points in critical chain, and it's out there. Some of your companies might be using that in their businesses.